Welcome, my friend, to Next Level Change Success, a change conversation for leaders, project and change practitioners for today and tomorrow. My name is Therese Perez of myvirtualchangemanager.com, and I'm an experienced change and project professional and people leader with many years of experience in the industry. I love business, and I love the people side of business especially. So nothing lights me up more than seeing people use change management, project management, and strong change leadership to engage, motivate, and inspire people, and ultimately transform organisations. If you've heard about change management and have no idea of what it involves, then you're in the right place. If you know about change management, but you want to take your practices to the next level, then this is where you should be. I'm going to share the stories of my experiences, interview some fantastic people, and I'm going to explore all of the challenges and opportunities that you face in organisations right now. So please join me and let's go and have some fun. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Next Level Change Success. My name is Therese Perez, and I'm the founder of myvirtualchangemanager.com. I would like to welcome you to this podcast, and today's episode is all about what a typical change process looks like in the world of projects. So if you're a project manager or a project practitioner, this one's for you. And I would also like to acknowledge that I am recording on Tharawal country and pay my respects to the traditional owners and custodians on the land on which I am recording, and to elders both past, present and emerging. The change process. This is a really interesting one because I have spoken before about accreditations, the different change models. We've got CODA, we've got Kinsey, we've got ProSci, of course, ADCAR, which is quite popular and recognised. And what I will say is it's almost like going to a hardware store. If anyone's ever been in Australia, we have Bunnings. I'm sure over in America there's Walmart. In the UK I can't remember what the hardware store was when I lived in the UK. I'm not so sure that I went to a hardware store over there. It wasn't the type of life I was living over there, that I was doing home renovations. But when you go into those stores, there's all of these different brands of tools. So you've got your Makitas, you have your Ryobis, you have it's almost overwhelming. And it can be a bit like that with change. So what I've done is created the 4 phases in a typical change process in a project. The reason being is it typically lines up with the phases of a waterfall or a Prince 2 program or project. These are phases that you could easily align. And I will specify this is within a project environment, and typically for projects that have a year to implementation, even though at the beginning they might say we're going to deliver this within 6 months. You can collapse these phases, and I think that's a really important thing to note, that these phases you can run through pretty fast, but how well you actually implement these phases or do the work within each of these phases is going to impact the level of success that you achieve in the outcomes that you're planning to achieve from the outset. So it'll be no surprise that the first phase in projects is planning. And one of the key things or intentions, and I think this is really important to note, that if you're working in a project environment, that you really want to achieve your intention, which is clarity. So planning is all about clarity. It's not necessarily time constrained, because sometimes business areas are clear on the change that they want to make. They're clear on who's impacted by that change. They might already have a clear communication strategy that they want to put into play. So dependent upon your change ecosystem and how well, I guess, those channels are all set up, it actually might be a very fast process to get a plan in place. The other thing to note is that planning is also dependent on the experience you have around the table. So if you have people who've done this before, and you're working with subject matter experts, and you're a change practitioner working with people who've done it before, I think the biggest thing is that if you're a change practitioner, you could be holding and delaying things up because you're not facilitating a knowledge transfer process, that you're trying to create something that you own and that you are familiar with. So part of this is making sure that if you're recruiting a change person for a medium to large rollout, that you do have some level of experience that can help collapse the time around planning because they've been there, done that. And what they do is typically look at how they can tailor their approach to the organization, to the culture, and to the teams who are impacted. So that's one thing. If you're setting up a project for success, you would think about, okay, well, let's get someone with the right skill set. They might have done something similar in a different industry. I've talked about this before. That doesn't necessarily have to be someone who's been there, done that, because sometimes they can be very closed-minded, I guess, when coming into the organization. If they're not of a growth mindset and looking to learn, they're just looking to rinse and repeat, something that you might want to look at. But when you get the right experience around the table, you will absolutely be able to go through that planning process, achieving high engagement, looking to communicate out to the broader audiences who are impacted, and you will achieve that during that planning process. And you will also get clarity. And typically the questions that you ask in this planning process is what I cover in the 5-question change plan and creative change plan in 30 minutes, which is very much around the who, what, where, when, and why. And so you really are understanding the change at its core. The second phase, once planning has been achieved, you have a bit of a roadmap. You talk about this is kind of at a high level who's impacted. And so these are the areas I want to further explore, is you're heading into assess and design. And the interesting thing around assess and design is that you're assessing the impacts, really key. You're looking at the processes that are impacted, the people who are impacted. You're looking at and exploring, what does this mean for each of these areas or individuals who are impacted. And then off the back of that, you're designing your change plan. I always talk about change impact assessments and that they are key. They're almost like the engine. You can have a car. It looks very different when you're looking at a hybrid car under the hood versus a V8 or a V6. I'm not into cars. My other half certainly is. And so I don't know the ins and outs of it, but I certainly know when you lift up the hood of cars, the engines are very different, and your impact assessments are going to be very different dependent upon the types of change that you are assessing. Once again, during this phase, you're doing a next level relationship building, stakeholder inclusion. And when looking at design, I talk about change planning and design. So making sure that you have the right interventions and activities taking place with the right people at the right time. You can also look at design around ensuring that the solution that is being designed is fit for purpose. And a lot of that has to do with this concept of co-design. I've talked about the change diamond of effectiveness. I'll put a link in. This is very much around the human-centered design approach and how beneficial it is to take that approach during this phase. And certainly with planning, the difference between the planning phase and the assess and design phase is we're getting into the detail. And it's true what they say, the devil is in the detail. So the kind of traps that you're going to fall into comes from if you haven't done your impact assessment well enough. And I know oftentimes people are like, you can't have people in workshops. So one of the things I'm seeing a lot of isn't about the workshop itself. It's about the way the relationship's being built, or the impact assessment being a desktop exercise versus an interactive workshop where you're looking to elicit the story as well about the change itself and really understand where people are coming from. It's often, let's go through this spreadsheet. And that's the wrong approach, absolutely the wrong approach for change impact design. And I will be putting together a workshop, a webinar around how to run an effective impact assessment workshop. And I am putting together how to run an impact assessment workshop program for those who are interested, because it's really a skill. And all I'm seeing is technical impact assessments getting done. And that's extremely flawed. To take an analytical approach to it, it has to be a blend of analysis for sure, but also the conversation, the story, the engagement that you undertake with it. And so the intention with the assess and design phase is to get into the detail, to really understand it in depth. Now you can also go into that space of analysis paralysis. So it is important, as I said, you go down into the detail, immerse yourself into it, but you come up for air and you think, okay, how does this link strategically? Because this helps for you to get the best change plan and the most effective communication plan, understand what training may need to take place to support individuals. It helps you understand the change readiness piece. And so that is after the design is done for the change plan and all of the detailed interventions, detailed messaging, then we're off and running. Then it really comes down to further ramping up your communication, your engagement. You're heading into the pathway through to implement and reinforce. The implementation phase is also about ensuring change readiness. You want to ensure that you are being flexible during this time because we have a raft of pre-go live activities that you need to undertake, including training. Now, sometimes you might find that people want the go live to happen and training to happen afterwards. However, just know that there's a lag that you're going to achieve with that around benefits. Sometimes you don't get the luxury of time, so you need to be creative about how you timeline things in and what you might do after around this reinforce piece. And reinforcement is really key. It is about that follow-up that happens after go live of desired behaviors, of making sure that people are reminded, people are measured. Measurements are a great way to reinforce change. Having dashboards, having leaderboards around people who are adopting the change well. I'm not a subscriber to the name and shame if people are struggling with the change. It is more about understanding if there are particular areas that you need to focus in on more to support them post go live. And to have your right support model and accessibility to those teams is really critical. And by now already, you should have well and truly engaged with leadership whose key accountability during this post-go live phase is to reinforce, is to support their teams, is to raise issues to the project or program if there's something going on that isn't suitable for their team. And this is about trying to recover situations sometimes if things are being missed or if there are gaps in people's understanding of the change or their ability to adopt the change. So that's a phase 3, is the implement and reinforce. And then the last phase is all about review and learn. And this is where you get sometimes the biggest uplift, because in medium to large organizations where you have project discipline, one of the biggest challenges that everyone faces is turnover. And in project environments, typically there's contractors who come in, whether it be fixed term, whether it be pure contingent or consultants. What happens is all of the learning, the lessons, they get left. So it goes through to implementation, and the business just wants to roll people off the project, go on to the next thing as soon as possible. But if you don't actually do what we call a retro, so retrospective, which is say what worked well, what didn't work well. If you haven't been clear on your measures throughout your program, then all of a sudden you get to the end and you think, well, were we really successful? We're not sure. So once again, in that planning phase, you need to talk about measures, and then all throughout the actual delivery itself, that's what you're talking about as well. How are we tracking? Have we achieved what we wanted to achieve? And learning about things that you would do differently, what happened in the resourcing landscape, and capturing those, documenting those, and storing those where others can leverage and learn. That is where you actually get a return on investment, which is quite high. And recently I caught up with someone who I had been working with a number of years ago, and she mentioned that she was very grateful that I, as the change director, ensured that she had a change plan in place, that the measures were really clear, or what the outcomes that we're looking to achieve were really clear from a change perspective, because it meant that 2 years later, when the program, and this was a major transformation piece, was closing out, that she had a point of reference that she could pick up and then assess against and see how well she'd done in leading the program from a change perspective. So it is very much about begin with end in mind. For those of you who are Stephen Covey fans, it is one of the best books, enduring books, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. But this is part of that closing the loop and getting the feedback. And there are some ways in which this can happen, which are quite good. There are some ways that this can happen which aren't as effective, but we'll talk about that in the Change Management 101 program that I run, the Operational Change course. So there's the 4 phases of the change process. You have planning, you have assess and design, you have implement and reinforce, and you have review and learn. If you look to move through those at speed, you absolutely can, but just know these are the 4 key phases to actually go through if you are in a project or program. I hope you found this episode insightful around the change process itself, and it starts to enlighten you if you are working in the project environment. Come to myvirtualchangemanager.com. We have a couple of courses there that you may want to register for. Our operational change course, we're now changing the format of that. We're going to be running it twice a year for those who work in project or program environments, or if you're looking to introduce change as a discipline in your organization, you may want to participate in this course to understand exactly what it looks like and how a change can be affected in your organization and implemented in a successful way. Then come along and register for that course so that you can get communication when we go live with that. I hope you have a wonderful day. I hope you found that beneficial. And if you are enjoying Next Level Change Success, you like the tips and the hints that I provide from my many years of change experience, then please leave a review, because then others can find this podcast. And my whole intention is to ensure that more and more people, middle managers, project managers, those who are in support services who need to influence and affect change in organizations for the better, can find this podcast and can come and visit myvirtualchangemanager.com and get the benefit of learning all about change. And why does change matter? Because people matter. Have a great day.